Brexit, the election, Kentish wine and Britain's housing crisis. It's all discussed on Chris&Co, the show looking at what affects business in Kent. Hello and welcome to Chris&Co, the show looking at what affects business in Kent with me, Chris Price. Joining me this week is Richard Balfour-Lynn, wine producer at Hush Heath Wine Estate, and Peter Stringer, Chief Executive of Golding Homes. We're talking about the English wine industry, which is entering the world stage after a string of international awards for Kent growers, but it's facing troubles this year from drought and a late April frost. Later on, we'll show what happened when we spoke to businesses at Kent Vision Live exhibition about the hot topic of Brexit, and we'll discuss what can be done to address the UK's housing shortage. First though, we're heading to Chilham near Canterbury, where Bernie Botto attended the launch of a new vineyard earlier this month.
Kent is becoming the new hotspot for producing champagne. Over the past few years, more and more vineyards have begun populating the Garden of England. Amongst those is the famous Tétanger family from France, who have opened their first English vineyard in Chilham. President Pierre-Emmanuel Tétanger planted their first vines this morning.
It will be a complementary production between people who likes to produce excellent bubbles. We have not done it in terms of competition. We have done it in terms of friendship, and also because we are convinced that we can grow and produce an excellent sparkling wines here in this land of Kent.
Tétanger's Domaine Evremont vineyard was opened with the help of their English partner Hatch Mansfield. They say Kent has the perfect soil and climate to produce sparkling wine.
The key ingredients here are to be very selective in terms of your site. You want south-facing slopes, ideally on chalk, not necessarily, but we prefer chalk because that's what they're used to in Champagne, and below 100 metres. I think we have the potential, we have the friendship in terms of distribution and marketing, but particularly in terms of excellence of wine growing and viticulture, to start something new in England.
But the French aren't the only ones planting vines in the county. Only 20 miles from Chilham, the Simpsons family have been producing wine in Kent since 2014. They begun planting their final field this morning and plan to add 40,000 more vines in the next 2 days.
We've got not similar geology to Champagne and Burgundy, we have the same geology, so we couldn't be in a better place. So having, a lot of sunshine hours makes Kent incredibly suitable.
The one slight downside in the past couple of weeks was that we had very clear nights, and therefore there has been a couple of frosts, and we have had some damage from that frost. That's part of the risk of where we've decided to grow grapes in this country.
If all goes to plan, residents of Kent will soon be able to buy French quality sparkling wine at their local wineries. Bernie Botto, KMTV.
Okay, so Richard, what does the arrival of Taittinger, a Grand Marque champagne house, say about the wine industry in Kent?
I think it's a great endorsement for the English wine industry as a whole. It's really a coming of age that a French champagne house now is coming to southern England, and particularly an endorsement for Kent as a growing area. Kent is the Garden of England, so it is really one of the most foremost grape growing areas in southern England. So I think it's great news for us.
Brilliant. I mean, Peter, as a consumer of wine, maybe in some way, I mean, do you one of the big challenges for English wine is getting the message out there that it's around, and do you see it in supermarkets? Have you tried it? Do you think that the profile is raising at all?
I think as a lover of wine, and as someone who's travelled quite a lot, to Italy and France, I think the problem is the point you've just made, really. It's about availability in the supermarket, because I walk along the shelves in well-known supermarkets and don't see English wines. So certainly promotion's an issue, and stocking by some of the major retailers.
Is that something that the Kentish wine industry is working on, trying to push?
I mean, the challenge is, for the last few years, the production of English wines come down at a time when demand is rising. But at Hush Heath, we're working with a number of the major multiple retailers, and now most of them are stocking English wines. Of course, there's not that many on the shelf when compared to all the other nationalities, and you need to know about it. But I think awareness is rising rapidly, and now on most wine lists throughout the UK, you'll find English wine on the wine list, which was very different from merely a couple of years ago.
Sure. I mean, one of the things this year, though, for the wine industry in England and Kent in particular, is we've had a few issues with the weather. We had a late frost in April. There's been a lot of things in the news lately about drought perhaps being an issue sort of for the wider agriculture sector and for people, you know, generally in their homes. Is this going to be a challenging year for Kent's wine sector?
Look, I think for the whole of wine across continental Europe and the UK, you had an Arctic frost that literally came up from southern France. So they actually had frost in Provence for the first time ever. And it damaged a lot of Champagne, a lot of the Loire, a lot of Chablis, and got into most of southern England. And it was really, what it was an air frost. So we're used to dealing with ground frosts, but it was an air frost, and we've had nothing like it for about 25 years. So it's the first time in 25 years. So it will create a challenge this year. It's difficult to know how much damage has taken place for another few weeks until we see more buds coming out. But it certainly there'll be a shortage of supply in the future.
So presumably as a wine grower, you have to have some kind of plan in place for these kind of eventualities. I mean, growing wine in the south of France is one thing. Growing it in England, you must be aware, you know, you're already on the sort of fringes of what's possible in terms of wine growing. So, you know, are wine growers prepared for this kind of thing, are they?
Well, ultimately, the way to deal with it is you build up reserve wines. So in a bad year, you have sufficient reserves built up. But we're a very young industry, so most of us haven't built up sufficient reserves. But over the next 5 years, that's the sort of thing we'll all be doing, building up reserves. And at Hush Heath, we're planting a lot more vineyards. We're planting geographically, so for geographical spread to deal with risk. But at the end of the day, if every 25 years you get this type of weather pattern, there's really not a lot you can actually do about it.
Sure. Peter said that he can't, you know, he struggles to find some nice wine in the supermarket. Obviously, we're going to, you know, you're saying that Hush Heath is working with a number of supermarkets at the moment. Presumably, the English wine industry still has a long way to grow. And how quickly before it really gets into that national and international consciousness after winning, you know, some big industry awards?
Well, look, in the last 12 months, we've started exporting. So we launched in the US last October. We're now actually selling across 20 states in America. So in under 6 months, that's fairly phenomenal. We're selling in Hong Kong, we're selling in Belgium, we're selling right across most of Europe, we're selling in Japan. So it's small quantities, but English wine is now starting to export, and it's definitely growing. And in terms of national listings, you will now find English wine in most of the supermarkets. And places like Majestic, which is a national wine retailer. So it is growing, but you know, again, as I say, the quantities are small, and it will take a long time to grow to a level that we can supply demand.
Sure. Very quickly, the key thing is the taste test, and I know, Peter, you've tried a couple. Did they taste any good?
Yeah, excellent. Absolutely superb. In fact, I need to talk to Richard after the show, Chris, to see if he's going to make a special reserve in honour of Mr. Trump's visit to the UK.
Oh, right, okay.
Well,
perhaps something.
There's a question.
Yeah, perhaps something for another time. But moving on swiftly, this month's saw the largest business-to-business exhibition in the southeast, Kent Vision Live, which saw 300 companies promoting themselves to about 3,000 visitors. The hot topic of the show was Brexit and what it will mean for small and medium-sized firms. Lucy Norris went along.
I'm here at Kent Vision Live, an exhibition where thousands of businesses come together to promote their companies. I went to find out how businesses are feeling about the prospect of Brexit.
The uncertainty at the moment isn't helping, but I think we've got to live with that really for the next 2 years or so. But I think employment law may change in the long term in some respects, but I think most employment rights that we have in this country will probably remain unchanged.
I think it's going to be an opportunity. We do stuff, branded merchandise in different parts of the world, so I think we've just got to get on with it.
It may very well affect my business. You know, a few of my clients may have difficulties because of it, but I think that the only businesses that are really going to be affected are those that trade overseas.
For us, it has had a very positive impact in the fact that we're not at risk of what's going to happen to our exports. We are at a great benefit of people doing staycations, people looking at where their food and their drink comes from, people sort of working out what there is on their doorstep.
For me, I was brought up obviously, you know, in the 70s when there was no European Union, and actually, you know, things were good then, and I think we can make Britain great again.
Lucy Norris for KMTV.
So Peter, do some of the concerns aired by businesses at the show there ring true with you?
Some and some, I think, Chris. I think in terms of the long-term financing of our business, which is building and managing homes, we're taking the opportunity right now to borrow another £50 million, including some European Investment Bank money, because we do have some long-term concerns that that option might not be available post-Brexit. I think the construction world generally does employ a fair amount of migrant labour. When the crash hit in 1989, I think the chief executive of Barratt said then that we lost 600,000 skilled construction workers from the sector. So obviously do have some concerns about those issues. But in the longer term, I think it will be fine. You know, the future's rosy.
Sure. The point that Peter raises there about migrant work is actually also a very pertinent issue for the wine sector, which relies on a lot of pickers, pruners from the EU to upkeep the vineyards. You know, is that a concern for yourself, Richard?
I think that the government will undoubtedly allow people to come over for 3-month stays as they currently do. I can't see that changing. I think Brexit's a great opportunity. I think you can look at all the downsides. None of us really know how it's going to play out. So for the next few years, none of us are really going to know, and that does create uncertainty, obviously. From our perspective, you know, we're going to have more people staying in England and Britain, in particular. The weakening pound has meant that we're exporting more effectively to the States and to Japan and to Hong Kong, which is beneficial for us. I feel very positive. I think English brands and British brands have a great opportunity to really continue to grow, and so I feel very positive about it.
Peter, is that what you sort of feel, you know, when you're speaking to clients, that actually businesses sort of pulling its socks up and rolling its sleeves up and getting ready to sort of take on whatever's thrown at them, kind of thing?
I think that's true. I do share Richard's optimism, but obviously we're not an exporter. Our product is produced and built in the UK. I think the issues for us are more around the affordability of our product and what might happen to inflation in terms of the internal market with cost of materials and labour and so on. And the affordability of our product for people. I mean, we're sat here in the most wealthy part of the southeast. 28% of working people in the southeast are in receipt of housing benefit or income tax credits because they can't afford their housing costs. The average house in our region costs £330,000, according to the National Housing Federation statistics. Now that's 11 times the average income. So there are some real pressing issues at home as well as abroad. It's
a huge issue for the political parties. You know, what's going to be, you know, vying for our votes in the upcoming general election, what they're going to be doing about Brexit, and with the, you know, the impact on living standards and people, you know, people being able to afford things. I mean, do you think that the parties are convincing people with their arguments? Do you think that they appear convincing enough in their approach to the negotiations?
Look, I've been fairly critical of the way both sides of the argument put their case when we came up to a referendum. I don't think the public really understood what they were voting for, and both sides of the argument exaggerated their case substantially as opposed to giving a balanced view, and I think that's a shame. I think carrying on from that, we still really don't know what it's going to look like. The negotiations will take place largely in private, with a lot of headline news around it. But that's all positioning. So I don't know. I don't think we really understand what's going to come from it. And I think that obviously one of the issues is businesses don't like uncertainty. So more than anything, that's to me the biggest impact.
Is this the issue that sways voters in the election? The Brexit, you know, what will be the outcome of Brexit? Is that the key topic of this year's vote?
I sort of agree with Richard in that we didn't know what we were voting for at the referendum stage, and we don't know what we're voting for on the 8th of June. the deal will develop as the negotiations develop. But like Richard, I'm pretty optimistic. I mean, we drive and purchase a lot of German cars. We build some houses with some German bricks, and therefore, and Richard's exporting to Europe and to the US. So I think I'm optimistic, ever optimistic that a good deal will be struck for Britain.
Moving on very slightly, this is one of the final times that I guess Peter will represent Golding Homes, actually, the company you set up in 2004 when social housing work was transferred from Maidstone Borough Council into the not-for-profit company. You're retiring this summer after 37 years in the social housing sector, and I mean, in that time, the housing association you run builds homes for low earners, and the biggest problem facing this country is one of the biggest problems is that we're not building enough homes and that people can't afford homes. What bearing do you think that our, the impending economic uncertainty of leaving the EU is having, on the housing crisis? We're not building enough houses for everyone to live in. Is that something that can be solved amid this, time of economic turmoil of the Brexit negotiations?
I'm ever the optimist, Chris, and it's actually my fault that we're not producing enough houses, because my first year in housing was 1979, and that was the last time we built 250,000 homes, and that's what we need to build every year.
That is the government target, 250,000.
It is, and we're last year we hit about 150,000, so we're still short by a considerable margin. There's all sorts of things that need to be done to improve the supply, and I think government in the last white paper hinted at some of the areas where we need improvement. So increased investment in infrastructure, roads, schools, airports, etc., to make sure we are more efficient as businesses. In terms of housing, I think the major issues about the cost of land and the way that planning permissions are actually processed. So we need some improvements there if we're going to make housing more affordable. And of course the issue about off-site manufacture for us is a big one. In Canada, in Germany, in Scandinavia, much more use of factory-built prefabricated units, which makes on-site construction a lot quicker, and like Richard's business, makes the weather less dependent on how quickly we can build houses or grow vines.
Well, we've got a graph actually, which shows here the number of houses which have been built in Kent over the last 10 years or so. You can see a dramatic drop-off after 2008, which only began to pick up again last year. Given that we haven't built the government's target of 250,000 homes, as you say, since 1979, is this a problem that can be solved? Are we heading towards a situation where we can ever fix this shortage of housing?
Look, I think somebody's home, probably after love and children, somebody's home is the most important thing to affecting their future life chances. So we've got to think about this in a very grown-up way and say, do we want to house our children and our grandchildren into the future, or do we still want to be able to overlook that green field at the back of our existing home? It's as simple as that.
Richard, you're a former property developer yourself. I mean, do you think there is motivation to get this problem fixed?
There's unquestionably motivation, and there's a desire to get it fixed. The problem, as Peter said, is there are a number of imponderables, like the cost of land, as you said, and planning permissions, and the fact that as you move outside London, there's a big lobby for protecting the green belt. And until the government decide one way or the other what they actually want to do and remain totally committed to it, the problems will probably remain.
Very, very briefly, the signs are that incomes are going to remain low and that inflation is going to grow over the next couple of years. Are people going to be able to afford their own home in the near future?
Well, I think owner occupation is certainly in decline if you look at the numbers over the past 5 years or so, and the private rented sector is on the increase, certainly in the southeast region. I think there will be a point at which affordability becomes a real issue.
Sure, thank you, Peter. Sorry, we have to finish it there, unfortunately, but that's it for the latest episode of Chris&Co. Thanks very much for watching. Have a very good day. Bye bye.